Yeah, I just started it.
Where's the camera?
What's that?
It's pretty small.
Yeah, it's the same one she uses. Actually, the exact same. Yeah.
Does it get the speaker over here?
I have a not a buffer. What's it called? An amp. An amp on
But they
the
don't see the
software.
speaker, they just hear them.
Yeah, it doesn't pick up the slideshow either, unfortunately.
That's all right.
Yeah.
That's great. Get all three commissioners and the screen.
Yeah, actually works since Ron's not here. There you go.
Technology.
And it was $800 cheaper than replacing that one.
Who made the agenda? Who made the agenda? I think Jim and Matt. I did Matt and Sean. You did a good job.
BJ, would you mind doing the invocation today?
I'm sorry?
Would you mind doing the invocation today? I just read it. What did you do? When did you last time? Good evening, folks. It is now 6 p.m., 17 December 2019, and it is time for Planning Commission meeting to start. It's a call to order. At this time, please silence your cell phones or turn them on vibrate for me, please. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then for the invocation. Ready? Begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's bow our heads. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening. We ask your blessings over this community, over this body. We ask your blessings over the citizens of California City and those, particularly in our community, in need. We ask a special blessing for those that serve across the country and across the world to protect families, and we ask that you would be with their families back home. This time of year, we think of you, Jesus Christ, and we ask your blessings on this agenda this evening, that decisions will be made that will be in the best interest for the city of California City long term. In Jesus' name we pray.
Thank you, sir. Madam Secretary, roll call.
Commissioner Trumbull.
Here.
Commissioner Macedonia.
Here.
Commissioner Hogan. Chair Creighton.
Here. Could I get a motion to adopt tonight's agenda, please?
Make the motion, we adopt tonight's agenda.
Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Madam Secretary, are there any reports or late communications?
We do have two to report. We have an email that was sent by DJ Tuvik, and there were two attachments. One was tiny homes overlay, and the other attachment was an ordinance adopting tiny homes. And that's all late communications.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we'll move into public business from the floor. Members of the public are welcome to address the Planning Commission only on those items that are not on tonight's agenda. Each member of the public will be given 3 minutes to speak. If anybody wishes to say anything, please approach the podium now.
Yes, good evening, Chairman Creighton and Commission. Just a quick announcement. This year, Kern Tax Board of Directors held an annual event. This is the first year that the City of California City attended. The speaker this year we brought in is renowned speaker Jim Mayer. He's the Senior Fellow President Emeritus of California Forward. And a lot of the conversation is about bolstering democracy, improving the performance of government in California, and advancing bipartisan political and fiscal reforms, working with state and local agencies to systematically engineer programs and services that improve results. Why is this important to California City? Because we need to improve our results. And we need to work with the government, and we need to work with the private sector to make sure that we can collaborate effectively, and that we not only collaborate effectively, but we collaborate with knowledge base and search out the ability to solve any issues or problems that we perceive in California City. I will, as it becomes available to me, I will make available to you the link of the video of the presentation. Additionally, last year, Mr. James Gold spoke at our annual event, renowned speaker, and that resource is available as well as we worked with staff at City Council, staff and City Council to bring forth better economic policies. A lot of that started with our framework for improving our local economy as a result of Jim Gold's presentation. So these are powerful presentations that can actually give us the framework to improve our policies here in California City. Yes, this is the Planning Commission. I do perceive that we have a lot on our plate here at the Planning Commission in the future with respect to general plans, land use. A lot of these things we can collaborate more effectively, and maybe this is a framework that can help us as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else? 3, 2, 1. Lou, you don't have anything to say?
Oh, I always have something to say, but
Public business right now. Otherwise, sit down.
Thank
you. All right. No more approaching. We have nothing on the consent calendar as staff was inundated with other work, so they did not get the minutes for the last meeting out. Apologies to all for that. There are no public hearings tonight. We have on the agenda 4 discussion items and 1 information item. Last meeting, before we get started, last meeting we had a lot of back and forth. That's not going to happen tonight. So when we do the discussion items, staff will present, or whoever is going to present, because Commissioner Macedonia has something to present. We'll ask this, as the same thing goes with council, we'll ask questions of staff, we'll open it up to the public, we'll speak, or we'll have comments, and then one more chance at the public, and then we will talk, and that's it. So we're not gonna do it back and forth. If there's a continuous back and forth, or there needs to be, please take it offline. All right, so, first item, tiny homes draft ordinance, staff.
Yes, Chairman Creighton, members of the commission,
I've been called worse.
this is a continued discussion item, actually. I want to point out that on December 3rd, your last meeting, the commission did direct the staff to prepare a draft tiny home ordinance, and we have done that. We want to point out that it's really to get to a point of constructing tiny homes in California City. It's really a two-step process. The first step, and the one you're going to address under discussion item number 1, is to amend the zoning ordinance to create a zoning district which will permit tiny homes. And by tiny homes, the broad definition, well, there are many definitions. One of them is 200 to 500 square feet. But in our case, when we're looking at our residential districts, particularly the single-family districts, we're looking at something, a single-family unit less than 1,200 square feet. The second step is going to be to rezone properties that are appropriate. And the commission discussed some of these properties. Discussion item number 2 will go into detail with more options than you talked about at your last meeting. Now bear in mind that if the planning commission directs the staff to prepare a final ordinance, we will bring it to you at your next meeting. I believe that's January 7th.
Yes.
We will notice it this week so we can meet the requirements to notice the hearing. And you'll make a recommendation to the council. And as soon as the council can notice it, they will have a public hearing as well. Once the tiny home ordinance or zone district is adopted, then and only then can you consider, you will have the ability to bring forward additional properties. And it's important to bear in mind that we're going to have to go through the notification process for each and every property owner within these areas that are designated for tiny homes, as well as all those folks living within, property owners within 300 feet. You will have a public hearing on the districts when you recommend for a tiny home district. And what else is important is we're also going to have to amend the general plan, because bear in mind that we're increasing the density. But we believe this is very doable, and we think it all can be done with the second set of hearings. So the first hearing will be to recommend an ordinance to allow tiny homes, and the second, of course, will be to have specific land areas. So with regard to residential tiny homes district, first of all, we recommend that you don't mix ADUs with residential districts. And the reason for that is ADUs per state law are permitted in any residential district. And we believe that we'll just confuse things. It's important to have, we believe, a special district specifically designed for tiny homes. Now, there was some debate last meeting. We didn't get a consensus. The draft tiny home ordinance that's in your packet actually allows a mix of conventional single-family homes to 100 square feet or larger, and the tiny homes. That's the way, if approved, just the way the draft is now, it would read. So, first section is definitions. I know if it's under 200 square feet, they call it a micro, but the ordinance we were drafting this from actually defines it as between 150 to 500, but somewhere in that general area, 150 to 200 square feet, up to 500 is considered a tiny home. We might also indicate that the materials for the exterior should be stucco or stone, Windows should be double pane glass, and roofs have a minimum pitch of 4 to 2, and insulation in the walls. Again, the density will increase because we're recommending that you can have up to 3 tiny homes per lot. So in some of these areas you're looking at, if you've got a 10,000 square foot lot, you could have as many as 3. If you have a 6,000 square foot lot, you could have as many as 3 tiny homes. This is a project I worked on. I worked for an entrepreneur that builds tiny homes. Actually, these are called Flex Home. It's actually, these are pushing the envelope. They're about 500, 550 square feet. They're convenient because you can assemble them. 2 flatbed trucks will get you one of these Flex Homes. And what was unique here is the interest in having common open areas. It's not a requirement, and this ordinance would not make it a requirement. So the requirements for tiny homes, again, only 3 on lots less than 10,000 square feet. Mechanical equipment should be located into the structure, not on the roof. Materials for exterior should be stucco or stone. Tiny homes shall be connected to water, sewer, septic, and electric or solar with backup. Now, Mr. Berrigan is here tonight, and after I conclude some remarks, I'm going to ask Joe to talk about off the grid, because we want tiny homes to be able to be sustainable off the grid. And so if you notice what that requirement says, is it has to be connected to water, sewers, or septic, electric or solar with backup. So again, you're not required to hook up to the main state utilities under this ordinance. Windows, at least double pane glass, and tiny homes are required to have sprinklers. Actually, it says in your ordinance they're not required to have sprinklers, but in a meeting yesterday with the fire chief, he informed us that tiny homes should, based on building codes, and that's something Mr. Berrigan can address, should have sprinkler systems based on state law, and also sufficient water supply. The purpose, again, we're going to be looking at medium to high density, and in order to be consistent with the general plan, when we bring land areas to you for amendments or adoption to this new residential tiny home district, we're going to be looking at up to 20 units per acre. So this is actually a more conventional single-family home district adjacent to tiny homes indicated by that yellow area. Again, there's common area along with also some recreational amenities. You can see there's a clubhouse and a common court area. The same thing again. Combination of movable tiny homes. Our ordinance would prefer that they be permanently on a permanent foundation and not on wheels. That's another item that the commission may wish to address. For permitted uses in the district, like all other zoning districts, first of all, we're talking about 1-family detached units. Although you could have up to 3 per parcel. Private garages, I know it says up to 3-car garages, people raise their eyebrows, but again, as long as we're going to allow conventional single-family homes, we didn't want to remove the opportunity to have a 3-car garage. Tiny homes shall be connected to water. Again, this is redundant. Conditional uses. Every zone district that you go through has permitted uses, and we've just gone over those single-family units primarily, and then conditional uses. That would include, and this is consistent with the R1, electric distribution substations, gas regulator stations, public utility pumping stations, mobile home parks, planned developments, licensed daycare, and 24-hour care facilities for foster homes. Now, so you see in the tiny home district, one could actually move forward with a mobile home park and a planned development, which is important because if someone were to put together, parcel together 4, 5, 6 existing parcels, they would be able to create that planned community that we saw in some of the prior slides, where you have certain amenities, along with a higher density of tiny home units. And, because we want to include this one, uses that in the opinion of the planning commission are similar to and no more objectionable than other units. Setbacks, based on state law for ADUs, we thought it would make sense for tiny homes. Rear and side yards, 4 feet, and this is as much a fire concern as anything else. And then in the front yard, Joe and I talked about this, right now it says minimum 20 feet. I asked Joe how long his truck is, he says 22 feet, so we thought we'd gotta go with 25, just to be able to get it totally off the right of way. This is the map that Sean's gonna be referring to in the second discussion item. Again, once the ordinance is adopted, then you have many options, and you could even add more options. I know there's some discussion about possibly going to Second City for some of the opportunities. So these would conclude my remarks on the draft ordinance. Mr. Berrigan, our senior building official and acting public works director, has some thoughts, and I'm gonna ask him to share his thoughts about living off the grid. And this would mean possibly a water tank in some cases, and Joe had mentioned possibly cinders for the roadways. But Joe, I'd like to ask you to help us out at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, so one of the benefits of these tiny home districts would be if we were able to have some tracts where there is currently no water or power. The great thing about a tiny home is such a small footprint, you can actually have heating and air conditioning through a split unit, which will draw, depending on the size of the home, anywhere from 500 to 600 watts. So you're able to get a smaller solar array, maybe a 10,000 kilowatt backup battery, and then you could do we'd have to do the math, but speaking with the fire chief, they could have a water tank for fire protection for their sprinklers and for a fire department connection. So you could possibly have 2 water tanks, one for your fire protection. It could range anywhere from, depending on the size of the home, 5,000 to 10,000 gallons. And then you could have a 5,000 gallon tank for potable water to supply your home. So then a tiny home could be built in these tracts where we currently have no water, no power, and it'd be completely off the grid, and it'd be feasible to have it would meet all building codes if built right. And I just think that's a huge benefit to us. I was speaking with Matt, and I was mentioning to him that I do get calls periodically where people call up and they want to know what they can do with their lot. And I just tell them, depending on your zone, there's this, that, but they're so far away from water and they're so far away from power, because of the cost, they really can't do anything with their land. They're not going to spend $1 million to bring water to a lot when the lot only costs $500. So this would be a great way to give value to these lots and allow these people to be able to do something with their lots. And then I'll answer any questions if there's any.
Is that it for staff?
Yes, it is. We'd be very pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Commissioners?
I have none. Regarding the water, Joe, would each tiny home have to have its own water tank?
Yeah, no, they would have to have 2, one for fire protection and one for potable water.
So each home would have to have its own, one for drinking water and one for fire protection.
And that's currently not allowed through our municipal code. We'd have to bring a staff report forward to city council and see if they would amend that and allow water tanks for storage.
Okay, and as far as the power, it would be solar, and because these are considered for you to be off the grid, right?
Correct. They would have to have a solar array and a battery
With
backup.
a battery backup, and then we'd have a septic tank likewise, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
All right, I got a load. This is on taxes. If there are multiple tiny homes on one lot, all owned by separate people, who pays the taxes? That's first and foremost. Okay, so unless I own the lot and I build 3 homes and I rent them out, that's one thing. But if you have, are we gonna restrict it to the one owner for as many as he can possibly build? But that's just one thing. Another thing is on the tanks. For a 5 to 10,000 gallon tank for both fire and potable water, how elevated do they have to be in order to provide sufficient pressure?
Yeah, that is correct, they would have to be elevator. I'd have to see
Yeah,
the
but
math
do
on
we
it.
know how high?
Yeah, no,
We don't?
I'd have to do the math on that. and figure
Okay.
it out.
All right, now, I got some administrative stuff on the resolution itself. Under section 1, on purpose, include the 500 square foot maximum. And I would recommend saying dwellings from 150 to 500 square feet in size, excluding any loft area, because that's basically the way they're talked about now. We need to mirror what current, what the current verbiage is. Section 3, we should probably include the maximum of 500 square foot as well, under section 1, or item 1. Under section 4, or item 4, why are we limiting it to cement tile shingles? Can't we just use any approved roofing material?
Yeah, this is a work in progress.
I understand, and that's what
We could, yeah.
I'm working,
It
those
would-
are my ideas.
The idea was just to demonstrate how we could design, we could require a higher end looking home, so it looks nice, it's a good.
I understand, but like, okay, I'm thinking ADUs now, forget it, okay, another subject. I'd like to put a maximum pitch on the roofs as well. If we could, maybe not to exceed 6 and 12. Because otherwise somebody's gonna build literally an A-frame.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's gonna look good in a desert.
Right.
Under section 4, I apologize for my voice, but I'm beginning to catch what I think Matt had. Under section 4, does the state recognize tiny homes as ADUs? That's just a throw-out question.
So I'll explain it to you right now. An ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. So although they can be the exact identical structure, if there isn't a main single-family dwelling, then you don't have an ADU.
Right, I understand.
And that might be a point of clarification. So on these tiny home tracts or zones or districts, we wouldn't allow 3 tiny homes. We would allow 1 tiny home with 2 ADUs to meet state requirements, and that's required by law, we can't deviate from that. So, and the only reason I bring that up is because someone could build 3 tiny homes, say you allow 3 tiny homes, now I wanna put in my 2 ADUs that the state allows, and now we'd have 5 structures on a lot. So that's something we'll have to fix.
Okay.
Just a maximum of 3
That's
units.
3 units.
One primer.
I feel that they're separate and distinct, but that's another subject. Under, still in section 4, item 1, why don't I include the minimum lot size that you put down below of 5,000 square feet, and also in section 9-2.503A. If you have 3 tiny homes on a lot, each one's gonna have its own independent septic tank with a deep pit or a leach field, whatever fits.
It depends on the way the math comes out. You probably could have one big, you could probably have a 1,200 gallon septic tank,
Right.
and that would probably accommodate all 3 structures.
So that's something we would have to actually amend as well, right? But does that part of does the building code allow that?
Yeah, the design would come from the mechanical engineer that does the plans, and they would determine what they need based off of codes.
We all realize that putting covered parking on a tiny home lot is gonna exceed, most of the time it's gonna exceed the size of the tiny home. That's kinda odd. I'd like to have some consistency in the section, or actually the document itself. Are we gonna call them tiny houses or tiny homes? We should pick one or the other and just go with it. These are all mostly administrative things right now. I still can't believe we're gonna allow a 3-car garage for a 500 square foot home. Okay? It's just something, okay. Under 9-2.502D, which is where'd it go? Under conditional uses. I disagree with the mobile home parks mainly because, tiny homes themselves, and I know they can be tiny homes on wheels, but that's a whole separate subject. So if we're gonna talk tiny homes, we need to talk permanent, slab on grade or on foundation. So we need to either disallow or start the conversation for tiny homes on wheels. Some general comments. I received a couple of phone calls this afternoon from two individuals, both of whom are not categorically opposed to tiny homes. They just want to see it done right. A few questions came from these two conversations. One, are any of these tracks in flood zones?
Some of the proposed tracks are adjacent to flood zone.
Adjacent or in?
It's
Because that's gonna cost the builder more money to build that place up, to get it out of the floodplain. So I think we kind of need to kind of sidestep those. If it's truly adjacent to, that's fine. But if it's in the middle of, I'm not sure that's a good recommendation. Just saying.
No, it's not in the middle. It might be in a minor flood zone.
Okay. Well, this question was brought up, so I'm bringing it up. Are any of these tracks, SDI tracks? None.
Yes.
Which one?
Not
Do you know? Pardon?
4 of them.
on this one.
These are concerns for some of the people that called me.
Would you like me to answer?
Just point them out, please.
The 4 SDI tracks are 2898. Second community is 3061, 3062, and 3198. Those
Okay,
are
so-
4 SDI tracks.
What we're looking at, just the one, 2898 is an SDI
That's
track.
correct.
All right, thank you.
On respect to flood, the Cache Creek Flood Basin is immediately adjacent to 2223, 2630, and it has a very minor encroachment on a few lots on the edge of Cache Creek. 90 plus, 95% plus of those tracks is not encumbered by the flood channel.
All right, thank you. Last question. I don't think this is gonna go over well, but does an entire tract need to be converted, or can the city start with a few parcels and grow from there? This is just something, food for thought, folks. Other than that, the only other question I have, based on what has been brought up, is how are we gonna pave the roads? Gotta get access in and out. I don't think people wanna drive through mud. I know we don't get a lot of rain here, but when we do, it comes in large buckets.
And some things that have been discussed about was a potential impact fee, for the fire department. The fire department would wanna have a water tender truck. So, there was a talk of, and obviously we have to do a little study on this to find out what type of impact fee we charge on each tiny home to eventually buy the fire department a water tender truck. So it could be $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, that'll depend on the study. Similar things could be done with the roads. We could require impact fee, and then we could, that needs to be worked out. We could always do type 2 base for now, things like that. That's definitely things we need to discuss and figure out.
Again, a work in progress.
Correct.
So we're gonna pump water into the tanks. Okay. All right, public comment. There you go, folks. 3 minutes, please.
Rick Warren, couple things. To do multiple family dwellings, basically what you're doing, you're gonna need to zone it to the RM type or add that to it, because the only way you can have rental properties that is an R property, it has to be an RM. It can't be just R. So a lot of the maps that you showed are regular residential properties, and you can't, in the current code, you can't do multiple rental properties in an R zone. You've got to be RM1, RM2. So if you're gonna put 3 units on it, it needs to be zoned for the proper use, or you're gonna have to adjust the zoning for the RMs. Roads, unfortunately, there are several, current homes that are not even on paved roads. On the south, side of the city, over near Poppy, not Poppy, but, Jimson, off of 81st Street, in that area, there's a lot of roads on, a lot of houses, full-size houses and apartments on dirt roads, so that's another good addressing. Also, you didn't know, it does say, 3-car garages, but how many? It doesn't specify. Me, personally, since my kids are growing up, a 1-bedroom house with a 3-car garage would be awesome, because it can't go back.
I agree.
But those are some of the other items that hasn't been addressed. Definitely don't want them to be movable, otherwise you should just put them in the mobile home park. Water tanks, there is a couple issues with water tanks. One, getting them filled up and use, and the size of a water tank too, because that could be the size of the mini home. So you gotta keep that in mind. Also, not just solar, you may wanna think of propane with propane generators to generate the property. So now you got gas and electricity to work from. And I do agree that a tile roof is not gonna make it that much more better looking. You may wanna, also, have multiple types of roofs to be available.
Agreed. Metal.
Metal roofs, in that direction. But those are some of the issues on the real estate side that we do need to address and kind of keep in mind. Your zoning, again, does not allow for multiple rentals on a single lot that's just an R, R1, R2. It has to be RM. So you may have to go into adjusting that as well.
Okay, that's the purpose of creating the new district,
Yeah.
to accommodate all that.
Can we, address that real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
So that's where I said we made a mistake in the way we wrote it. We should only allow 1 tiny home per parcel, because the state already allows 2 ADUs on that parcel. So that's where the distinction is. Right now, regardless of what our municipal code says, we have to follow state laws. And in an R1 zone, you can add 2 ADUs and rent them out, unfortunately. That's already state law.
Yeah, I know, I've been reading it. Believe me, I spent an exhaustive
And then
amount of time, maybe 68.
On the water tanks, if this was allowed and went forward, the idea would be that we would either put an RFP out to get a franchise business to fill up the water tanks every month and buy the water from the city, or possibly the city could buy a water tank and then we would charge to go fill them up.
Kind of like animal bakers.
Hi there, Christy Munn. Yeah, the new state law, I think, will allow the ADUs and a tiny home can be an ADU in a backyard. A couple things I had also on the roofs, tiles and composition tile roofs. Metal is much better, and there are so many other things, so don't restrict it to just tile. And covered parking. And again, I agree with Jim there, the covered parking would be larger than what the house is, so why didn't we write? And if you look,
I have comments and questions. My first thing is, I really think that the suggestion that we make sure we separate ADUs and tiny homes in our ordinance is the right thing to do. We don't want to have strange